Shalom. Let's look at some news from Iran at the moment with regards to the Abraham Accords, which we know is setting the baseline for that agreement which will be strengthened by Antichrist one of these days. Iran is beginning to understand the Abraham Accords. Iran was surprised to see the recent Negev summit where Israel hosted the foreign ministers of the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco and Egypt. It is now examining how strong this new alliance might be. While Tehran has been shouting about the Abraham Accords since the beginning, accusing Arab states of betraying the Palestinian cause and threatening them against working with Israel, it appears the Islamic Republic now understands that it's a new era of peaceful diplomacy and it's happening and can't be prevented. Interesting. Iranian media said the Gulf states have become closer to Israel because they see the US leaving the region. The US withdrawal from Afghanistan was one of the aspects of this new shift, so more states will be moving to Israel because the US has left the neighborhood. Last year's US withdrawal from Afghanistan woke up the well-to-do sheiks on the southern shores of the Persian Gulf and raised the question in their minds, what to do after the US? Who's going to save security for countries that are mostly lacking in strategic depth and are on the verge of collapse? Iran's answer is that the Gulf states are shifting to Israel for support. Iran's media acknowledged that the recent meeting was the first time that a foreign minister of these countries have all gone to Israel together. This is historic. The Zionists chose the meeting place of the ministers of the 4 Arab countries with the foreign minister of the Zionist regime in the Sde Boker area in the Negev desert, the area where David Ben-Gurion, the founder and first prime minister of the regime, built a house for himself and his wife. Iran monitors these developments closely. They understand the countries also have some concerns about Iran and its nuclear deal, and it is clear that this meeting was held against Iran and provoked by the Zionist regime. Tehran also followed closely another meeting where Egypt hosted Israel and the UAE, in which Iran said that the regional defense cooperation against drones, missiles and other hazards were on the agenda of the 3 leaders. Now Iran wonders if this new era will mean that these countries will work successfully with Israel. Will the Zionist regime be large enough to lead this coalition against Iran or any other country? The leaders of small Arab countries do not seem to have thought enough about this question. Can an alliance with the Zionists, who are far weaker in all aspects of power than the United States, be able to bring security to those willing to impose the cost on their country in foreign policy? This shows that Iran predicts more security risks for the Gulf. Iran is examining how strong this alliance could be. Tehran says it will not turn a blind eye to the coalition, and it could mean new Houthi attacks on the Gulf. Iran also points to Hamas having waged war against Israel in May 2021. The Islamic resistance, Hamas, fired more than 12,000 rockets at the occupied territories. The Islamic Republic praises the recent terror attacks in Israel in Beersheba and Hadera, claiming that 5 Zionists were killed in one of the attacks. These operations have shocked and confused Israeli security services. What you can tell from that is that Iran is scared and intimidated, and calling Israel weak and useless compared to the US is just them acting out because they know that Israel is planning an attack on Iran. And the more support she has from other Arab countries and the more people that are joining the Abraham Accords, the more isolated Iran feels. Again, biblical, because Iran will be part of the alliance with Russia that comes up against Israel. So it's basically pushing her into a stronger relationship with Russia, which is needed for the Ezekiel 38 situation that is coming one of these days. We'll keep watching on this channel, we'll keep looking up, and we'll keep sounding the alarm and making sure you get the most important news that has any kind of biblical bearing until such a time as I'm busy traveling through clouds to meet my Maker. God bless. Shalom.